Greetings to you. Welcome to today's episode of Bolts of Wisdom. This is part 4 in the series, Walk Differently. This is part 4 in the series, Walk Differently. I would encourage you to visit the links on your screens right now or showing at the end of the broadcast so that you can catch up with parts 1, 2, and 3 in this riveting series. And just take off Ephesians 4, verse 17 to 18. We've already covered a lot of that. Then we'll move in to see how we can bring everything to a wonderful conclusion today. So start reading from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 in the King James Bible. Ephesians 4, verse 17 says, "This I say, therefore," but this Apostle Paul writing to the Christians at Ephesus, the Gentiles who were now born again, and there are people there who are still not born again. So it says, "This I say, therefore, and testify the Lord, that you henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, other unbelievers, those who are not born again. Other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind." Next verse, verse 18. "Having the understanding darkened," and we cover this in great detail. The word translated, the Greek word translated understanding there is dianoia, and we covered it in great detail in part 3 yesterday. So I'm not going to spend much time on it. It says, having the understanding darkened. So Koji says, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them. So they are being alienated from the life of God. They are apart from the life of God. They have no part in it. Why? Because of ignorance. We are born again Christians. We must walk differently. Peripateo is so in episode 1 of this series. Must walk differently. Now they are perishing. They are alienated, separated from the life of God. The Greek word translated life there is what Zoe, Z-O-E, which means the life of God. They are separated from the life of God, the nature of God. Why? Through the ignorance that is in them. They are suffering because of what? Ignorance. What a pity. Bring it up again. The ignorance that is in them. Hosea 4 verse 6 makes it clear that people perish or are destroyed for lack of what? Knowledge. That's ignorance. So these people that serve, they are ignorant. They have ignorance inside them. They are ignorant of God's things, God's agenda. He says, why is it so? Because of the blindness of their hearts. Notice here, because of the blindness of their hearts. The Greek word translated blindness in that verse is in Ephesians 4 verse 18 is porosis, spelled P-O-R-O-S-I-S. It has two meanings: blindness and what? And hardness. Now, these are people, they see physically, but they are blind in their hearts. They are spiritually blind. They're spiritually blind. They can't see the way God sees. They can't think the way God sees. They can't decipher the way God deciphers. Now, I covered that in earlier parts of this series. But what I want to focus on now today is on the second meaning of porosis, which is what? Hardness. Of what? Of their hearts. So they're ignorant because of what? Hardness. Porosis. Of what? Of their hearts. What does it mean to have a hard heart? When you have a hard heart, you are stubborn. What does it mean to be stubborn? Or just your definition of dictionary says, if you are stubborn, is someone who is having or showing dogged determination not to change one's attitude or position on something, especially in spite of good arguments or reasons to do so. You see, somebody wants to hold on to their position. They refuse to change. They defend that which is wrong, even when you've given them evidence and proofs. This is one of the most painful things for me as a pastor. You share truth in God's word with somebody. You show them the scriptures. You show them. You read with them. They read this. You explain to them. But they are not willing to change their positions. They defend that which is wrong. Some people justify the things that they're doing wrong. Why haven't you done this? They have a good reason. I want to let you know that many people don't do things that they don't prioritize. If something's a priority to you, you will do it. Stubborn people prioritize their positions in themselves. They don't prioritize what is right. They prioritize that which their own position. They will hold on to it. Can't even get angry or cry. They're stubborn. Judas Iscariot, who just was stubborn. He held on to being friends with Jesus' enemies. I told you before. If somebody says they are your friend and they are friends with your enemies, when they know that those are your enemies, they are friends with them, they are not your friend. Somebody who knows your enemies and is friends with your enemies cannot be your friend. They are worse than your enemies. It is your enemies out in the open. Notice scripture there says, you must walk differently. They are failing to walk differently. Why? Because of the porosis, blindness of their hearts, the hardness of their hearts. Matthew, let's go to Matthew chapter 19, verse 7 to 8. In King James Bible, an example where Jesus explains something. Matthew chapter 19, verse 7 to 8. King James Bible, it says. They were talking to Jesus. They said unto him, that's Jesus, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and put away? Next verse, verse 8. He said that Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. These are the Pharisees, scribes. They were trying to trap Jesus. They were trying to test him. They had hard hearts. Jesus taught and shared them many things. But they could not accept that Jesus was God, that Jesus was the way, he was the truth of the life. Even with all the miracles, they could not accept it. They had hard hearts. So they came to say, hey, Moses allowed us to divorce. What do you say? Jesus says, hang on. Moses allowed you to divorce because of your hardness of hearts. Stubborn. You want to hold on to your positions. People were coming to Moses and say they got marriage challenges. Moses would counsel them. But they would refuse to change. Until Moses was listening to so much rubbish. He said, let me allow them to divorce. Jesus says, it was not God's plan to divorce. Many marriages end up in divorce because one of the spouses, either the husband or the wife, is hard-hearted, stubborn. They won't change their position. If both husband and wife are stubborn and hard-hearted, divorce will happen quickly. That's one of the reasons why I have so many divorces taking place in the house of God among Christians. When one of them is hard-hearted, stubborn, hard hearts, their mind is blinded. All that matters is their position. They can't be corrected. Going back, we will start from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 to 18. We read so far. Let's just read those verses. Stay from Ephesians chapter 4 from verse 17 to 20. We read it in the Message Bible. You'll love how it paraphrases these ones. Let porosis not be your portion. Don't be hard-hearted. Open your heart to hear God's word. Take correction. I just finished preaching a series that was titled Forgive One Another. 5 parts. That's a very critical teaching. 5 parts in both of them. You need to watch that series over and over so that you don't have porosis, hard-heartedness. It will destroy you. So I read for you Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17 to 20 from the Message Bible. He says, and so I insist, and God backs me up on this, that there be no going along with the crowd, the empty-headed, mindless crowd. Verse 18. They have refused for so long to deal with God that they have lost touch, not only with God, but with reality itself. Yeah, they've lost touch not only with God, but with reality itself. Verse 19. They can't think straight anymore. Feeling no pain. They let themselves go on in sexual obsession. Addicted to every sort of perversion. Or verse 20. But that's no life for you. You learned Christ. That's no life for you. You learned Christ. Go to verse 21. My assumption is that you have paid careful attention to him, been well instructed in the truth, precisely as we have it in Jesus. Verse 22. Since then, we do not have the excuse of ignorance. Everything, and I do mean everything, connected with that old way of life has to go. You have to walk differently. Everything connected to that old way of life, before you go back, it has to go. It is rotten through and through. Get rid of it. And then take on an entirely new way of life. A God-fashioned life. Walk differently. And you enjoy a God-fashioned life. Thank you for joining us in this series. I encourage you to go over everything I've taught you. And I encourage you to go to Megasword College on the URL on your screens right now, www.megaswordcollege.com. Where there's some wonderful training for all Christians of all backgrounds, all ministries. And there's currently a special for the course Christian Development Program. It's an online program. It's got 14 lessons, 14 tests, and 20 hours of teaching, which you can do online at your own convenience, at your own pace. It's a gift of God, the body of Christ. It's a must for every Christian, especially if you want to live a God-fashioned life. That's a stepping stone, starting point for every Christian from every background. Thank you for joining us. Again, happy Easter to you. Walk differently. God bless you.